Hi, I'm John Gray with Fundamentals First Canine Training, and we welcome you back to another episode of Forged in Fundamentals. I'm your host, and I'm joined here today with Ian Austin, and I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then we will talk about what topic we're going to do.
Yeah, like you said, name's Ian Austin. Been a canine handler for going on 17, 18 years now, on and off. A couple breaks when I decided promotion was a good idea. It's not. But ultimately got back to canine. Now I run a single purpose explosive detection dog for a local agency. And then I do some training on the side with military and police dog units. And then just kind of dabbled in some breeding.
A little bit of each.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah, good. So I think that you bring a unique topic to the podcast because we've kind of touched on different aspects of tracking and training dogs. But I think today's topic is something that everybody uses, even without working dogs. But I think it's something that's really important.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about leash handling and communication through your leash. A lot of this came about for me out teaching other agencies, big, large venues, and realizing that it's not such a common thing, and that we have a lot of handlers that are handed a leash, and everybody assumes you know how to walk a dog, you can handle a leash, and there's really a lot more finesse and communication that can go into it. So
Yeah, it seems like I think when people usually think of a leash, it's just a control, right?
yeah,
Like most people with their dogs out walking, it's just, oh, this is just so I can control my dog. But then when you have somebody, I think the unique thing about like police officers and stuff that have dogs is it's not like you were raised to work with dogs, right?
yeah,
It's usually something you get thrown into. And so you don't know how much things like leashes are going to impact
yeah.
your work, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And like I know when I started in canine, they handed me like 6 different leashes, and they're like, here's this for this, here's that for that. Use this one for this and this for that. And that was the extent of the training for it, right?
Yeah.
Like, here's a waist leash. Cool, what's that for? Well, you put it around your waist. I'm like, okay, cool. And then here's your 6 foot, you can use that most of the time. And then here's a tracking line. It's long and tied in knots and gets really wet.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that we run into, right? Is like, and we were kind of just talking about that a minute ago, but it's like, what leash are you using for what job? And then how the style or kind of leash you're using impact what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. My day to day is as a 6 foot leather leash. I like the way leather feels. I started with biothane. I go back and forth. They both have their pluses and minuses. So yeah, you kind of your utility leash, as I would refer to it. I also still run a waist leash for that just in case moment, or run a lot of off leash stuff, and we always forget things. So at least I
Yeah.
always have a leash on me, or I can. That's kind of a go to for whatever. I run hip leashes, but my other big one is usually like a 20-foot leash or long line. I found 20 feet for me was kind of the sweet spot. 15 is great for tracking in urban areas, but 15 was the end of it. Whereas I wanted that extra 5 foot that I could have in my hands, and then 30 just seemed a little less manageable. But I every now and then I'll use the poo-pooed retractable leash in working dogs. I think if you use it the right way, it's a very viable option. If I could find a way to disengage the button and make the brake thing not there, that would be the go-to, but there's ways around it.
What do you think is like some of the biggest misconceptions amongst working dog handlers with the day in and day out of their leash that they might be like overlooking? Like,
I think that they're not realizing how much that leash communicates to their dog. And it really, like, when I was getting ready to do this, I was thinking back to like when that really hit home for me. And I was helping train a new patrol dog for a larger agency, and brand new handler, brand new dog. And they were having some issues. And so part of what we did to go check out and see, is it a dog issue or is it just a training issue, was we went to a Home Depot with the dog. You know, every dog trainer around does that.
yeah.
And of course, we have this new handler, new dog. He's supposed to be a bite dog. So handler's super nervous, gripping that leash like it's tight as he can, super choked up close to the dog. And you could just see the dog visibly nervous and mirroring what the handler, we know the universal, all your emotions run down leash. And that is very true. And you can see it in how the leash was being handled by this brand new handler. We're like, okay, let's reset. Handed it to a senior handler, let him run the dog through, and you watch the dog physically relax and just start going with the flow. in and out, not being aggressive towards people, not on guard when it would walk by somebody, just like oh, there's a person there,
Yeah.
we move on. So that was really kind of one of my light bulb moments that were really like, it's not just a saying of your
Yeah.
emotions run down leash. It is 100% truth. You know, our dogs communicate to us, or more, we communicate more through our dogs based on our body language. You know, that dogs read body language better than any human ever will, and that right goes into the leash. So as you grip that leash super tight, they're looking at you going, well, why are you holding me back? Like, are you holding me back because we're gonna run? Or are you holding me back because I need to fight somebody, or if somebody wants to fight me, and that sort of thing? And then, yeah,
Yeah, when you look at like all the different disciplines that dogs are trained in working dogs, there always is some variant of a leash or a tool that you're using. But the leash is one that, even though there's a ton of different lengths and styles, it's something you usually can't get around, right? Because there's certain areas we have to use them.
yeah,
You know, like if I'm going to run my dog along the side of a highway looking for something, you know, I want to have that little extra sense of security, or to be able to work him near closer to traffic, but still be safe. But all this stuff goes into what you're saying of like, what am I communicating? Because you and I could work the same dog, and maybe, you know, you're just feeling way more confident and relaxed. And all of a sudden the dog just does exactly what we needed them to for
yeah.
2 seconds before they weren't. And it's not necessarily like the dog just knew something different, but they can sense that, they can feel that. And that, you're right, it goes straight down the leash.
Yeah, that the leash pressure back on the collar or the harness, wherever it might be, you know, being able to, you can screw up a dog on a track, or a weaker tracking dog or a dog that's newer to tracking. You can totally influence their turns left or right, which is great when you're not tracking, right? If I want to direct my dog to serve a specific area and not have to be yammering at him all the time, right? Because that's the last thing we want to do, is just yammer at our dog and constantly make it so eventually our commands don't mean anything. But I can communicate to that dog, hey, check over here, by putting a little bit of pressure on up top towards one direction, a little bit of pressure the other direction, and that bends that leash into their collar, which pushes them in a certain direction.
Yeah. It's so wild to think about how all that impacts. And for people who like haven't done tracking, I see like a lot of videos now that give a lot of mixed messages, you know, like people
Hmm.
doing like Schutzen style tracking where the leash is just dragging.
Yeah,
But I think when you do like operational tracking and you realize like doesn't always like look like that, you know? And sometimes, you know, the dog's going to use a variety of skills while their nose is still down tracking, but how much that leash impacts them,
yeah.
you know? And
Uh,
then I see a lot of people, do you see them like how the leash is hooked up, you know, as well?
Yeah, for sure. You know, the start of when I started, it was, you know, hook it to their collar and put it under the arm to pull their head down into the track and all that. And, you know, some of those become those contextual cues for that dog for, hey, we're going to track, which is great. You know, these dogs are very contextual, and that's how they learn and how we can communicate with them more. But sometimes that just you know, if we're putting it under their right arm versus their left arm, what are we communicating, and how can I influence? Are we going to make more right turns, or are we going to be NASCAR and making lefts? Like, it's just,
Yeah, it is wild to see it kind of play out. And I think now that we like have more videos of stuff, you can see the good, the bad, and the ugly of
yeah,
things. But yeah, I mean, leash work's one of the skills that I think most people don't think about it when they're starting a dog out. But you can mess up a lot of communication if you don't do that right.
I like would go back to what you mentioned with the Schutzen tracking, where it's nice loose leash. You know, you got that big arc in it, and that's great if you're letting the dog be independent and not having to feel the dog for those. You know, on the police side, right? We're looking for that kind of proximity alert
Yeah.
if we're working for bad guys, or even in your case of your recent one, you know, hey, eyes up, guys, like we might be in something close, whether it's, you know, our missing person or our bad guy.
Yeah.
If we're on that loose leash, we don't feel that extra little lean in that dog's communicating back to us. So,
And we're definitely like, I find myself, I'm the one that for sure makes mistakes, like
oh
reading that, right? So he's telling me something clear, and then I just completely screw it up and miss it.
yeah,
And so there's so much feedback that you get through it. But one thing I find interesting that I was going to ask you about is what do you think about sometimes in certain aspects of your training desensitizing the dog to the tugging of the leash?
100%. So I'll give you a personal story on that. My current dog, I bred and raised her, and just eventually she didn't want to be a patrol dog. So she just kind of became a pet dog, maybe a little bit of sport. And so she got a lot of corrections and she didn't want to pull on a leash, right? Nobody
Yeah.
wants their pet dog to pull on a leash. So she was great. She didn't pull at all. Then I transitioned her into becoming an explosive detection dog, and I want her to commit to some motors that are downrange
Yep.
and pull me into at least the give me that proximity alert. So I had to actually revent the wheel and get her to pull on the leash and pull me into odor.
Yeah.
And that was a interesting problem to solve. It was a fun problem to solve. That one of those reverse engineering. Like most people don't have that problem. They're
Yeah.
they're constantly fighting that pulling. But yeah, the dog can definitely communicate a lot back to you through that.
What were some of the methods you used when you kind of reverse some of that training?
So a lot of it was putting her in a higher state of drive where there was something I knew she wanted down range, and then almost pairing that with the odor later on, and just letting her understand that when you smell this odor or when you smell one of your targets, this is okay. And I also made it very contextual with what equipment she was allowed to pull in. If she was on her harness or she was on a flat collar, pulling was okay. But still, if she was on a pinch or a slip or a choke, yeah, it's still a no-go.
Just heard somebody else talking. I'm now not going to remember who it was about this on a podcast, but like big problem. A lot of law enforcement letting dogs pull into a prong collar,
Yeah.
right? Like completely kills its effectiveness.
Yes.
It is wild because depending on what you hook up to, it's not hard to teach the dog, hey, I hook here, you can pull. I hook here,
Yeah.
please don't pull.
Again, it's just repetition and context.
Do you think that people wait too late to teach some of this stuff?
I think they can for sure. I think a lot of it comes with the indecisiveness of what's this dog going to do. I think once you have a clear path of what this dog's destined for, that's when we can start implementing all these contextual rituals and all that. Like there's no harm in it.
Yeah.
Because you know where it's going to go. Now, if you're one of those in between portions, right? If you're a vendor bringing up a dog, yeah, I'm not going to put these things in because it's ultimately not going to be my dog, and it's not that.
Yeah.
But I think waiting until you need it is definitely like, why not put it in training, and it'll make your training easier too. It'll set that dog up for success. Our dogs aren't the best at generalizing. We help them generalize so they can. So why not give them that context of all of these clues, setting them up for success to get where they're going to go.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think we learned that when we trained our dogs, we kind of waited until later to start teaching that, hey, you can be disobedient if you're going to be obedient to odor, you know? Whereas with the puppy we just trained on narcotics, it was like we were in the imprinting phase and you're working on leash pressure. Like, hey, let's just do it now. Right. Because I'd rather this dog want nothing to do with you when he's in odor, just stay there.
Yeah.
And I found it to be just interesting to see how different the end result was, where now all of a sudden it's like you keep walking, the dog stays at odor. And we didn't have to shape that extensively in more like real world searching as much as we did.
I think the biggest problem I see is and I did it for the longest time, is our go-to and initial training was obedience. Right. And that can create so much issues down the road. And so building that obedience with these different leashes and that leash pressure and stuff like that is great if that's what you want. If you want an obedient dog, cool. But again, our dogs are designed to search, or they're designed to hunt, they're designed to engage with people. Whatever your sport, whatever your discipline is, obedience kind of comes on the backside, really. And it can be very contextual to, this is your primary, this is your secondary task.
Some it never comes at all. I mean, for a long time there, people were like, obedience and detection? You can't do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, what do you do? You're killing this dog's drive. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to think about how many leashes. I get asked a lot, like, well, what's that leash for? Because I have a traffic leash, or then the waist leash, and all different leashes. But I think for you kind of diving into this like leash handling course, and this is something that you're going to be doing upcoming, right?
Yeah.
Tell me just some different aspects of the course that you think will kind of reshape the way that handlers are thinking about their leash.
So it really comes down to like kind of the manipulation. It starts with the manipulation, right? The course, when I designed it, the whole course, to make the handlers run it on a 30-foot leash, so they learn how to manipulate the leash in ways that they're not going to inadvertently correct the dog or put these communications to the dog that they didn't mean to. So they have to learn to manage it on that end. From there, we do detection on it, right? And there's different aspects of, if you're on the side of the road versus if you have the open area, and giving that dog that freedom. But even I can give the dog just as much freedom on a 30 foot if I stand back from a vehicle while we're doing a search as I can on a 6. It's just how I manipulate it. Right. I just give that dog that full length. And as they start to reach the end, I need to pass it off and pass hands. Or if I'm running that 30, I have to kind of belay, right? If you're
Yeah.
familiar with rock climbing and all that, you have to, fish it in and fish it out and put brakes on it so the dog doesn't get tangled up and have this inadvertent correction.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because it's one thing to have the leash, it's another thing to figure out how to use
Yeah.
it.
And one of your other guests and I got into a debate, and we still have fun with it with James about tracking and where the extra of your 30 foot goes when you're tracking, and can you let it drag or can you hold it? I'm personally I like to hold the very end of the 30 foot leash, and I like to gather. But there's
Yeah.
times when it's not practical to gather, so we go back and forth on that. But
It's good to have a little healthy debate,
yeah, and the other part was, I threw out when I threw it. I actually threw it out on one of the forums on law enforcement forum, and gathering versus not gathering, or should I just run my retractable? And you'd thought I threw out like I don't know, like the worst piece of equipment ever. But really, I think the retractables have a place too, right? I see a lot of detection dogs, especially explosive dogs, when they start running like large venues, like stadiums and stuff like that. Running a retractable gives you that freedom to not have to worry about the running end, right? As long as you're not using that button, like I said, which is a huge context cue, a huge cue in itself, and will honestly murder your shoulders
hmm
when you
Yeah.
try to wrench that in there. So I'll run it every now and then. I run it carabiner through my belt, and then I run it like my long line. I have two hands on the line, and it just feeds it. It gathers for me,
Yeah.
and then I just run it like that, and I don't have to worry about it.
That's a smooth way to do it, because and I think it's hard for people to envision always, because you could have a canine in one county and a canine in another county, and their daily job looks a lot different,
Yeah,
and so try going into a house packed with stuff, horrible conditions, and do a search in there on a 15-foot leash.
yeah,
You're gonna get tangled up, and it's gonna be dragging through stuff you're gonna wish it didn't.
yeah.
And then
That's when you want those biothane ones that you
yeah,
can wipe down.
yeah, and that's where honestly the retractable can be nice if it's used like that, because you're not tripping over it. You can maybe work with the dog a little bit better, but I think that these are things that you're right. You're going to blow people's minds when
Yeah.
you say stuff like that, because
Well, and at the same vein, like there's agencies who require their dogs to be on leash at all times. Patrol, detection, doesn't matter. Handler has to be in physical control of that dog at all times. So how do you do that in a cluttered room? How do you do that when you're operating with a SWAT team that needs to move around this dog? So that's one part of my class too, is, running that long line from the back of the bus and
yeah,
being able to manipulate that leash in a manner that's not, one, communicating to the dog to stop, and two, doesn't create a trip hazard for all the hut guys in front of you.
it's a lot to think about, and then you also think about too, how does the leash impact the dog? Because like I said earlier, I make plenty of mistakes, especially you get out tracking or doing whatever, and the dog all of a sudden goes an unexpected way, and now the leash is under them and you're trying to untangle them, and so sometimes I notice like the dog just gets tripped up on the leash themselves, and then they're like, you're like, no, it's not a cue to anything.
Yeah.
So you got to really work through a lot of that stuff that you don't think about.
And I think a lot of the classes on the 4-day end of it, when I do with 4-day, is getting those reps of letting you and your dog work through what is a correction, what is an input, what is not, and what that looks like.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to hear, because I doubt there's many leash handling classes out there.
And not that I know of, it's not one of those, it's not a super sexy, flashy class that we're going to do a whole lot of stuff in. But the ones that I have run, I've gotten good reviews of, the guys have liked it. I try to make it fun. I try to make it so you are learning, so you are getting something out of it. It's not just me hacking at you. And I try to make it challenging enough that you can make competition. Part of one of my drills is I create a maze, right? We make a maze on the ground with some engineers spray paint, and it goes from wide, so your dog has a 30-foot span that he can go back and forth and do whatever, and then it'll shrink down, and you'll have to get him through a doorway. And then so you have to not only recognize that doorway up there and either gather your leash up, right, bring your dog back to you, because part of the instructions are keep your dog as far away from you as possible for the longest amount of time. You can't have him. I mean, yeah, if you wanted to game it, you could hold him in a 6 foot and in a heel the whole time. That's not going to get you anywhere. And then so we have these gates that they have to go through, and then I have little gates that they have to send their dog out and try to direct their dog to the cone or the through another gate, and then get them back and then come back. And so we walk through it a few times, and then all right, now we're going to put some competition to it.
Yeah.
If your dog strays outside of the gate because you let your leash, right? It's a 5 second penalty, and we'll see how fast we can go through. So we try to make it fun. It's not, again, it's not a flashy skill. It's not something that, but it's something everybody needs, and it's something that we can all improve on. On a daily basis, I do something with my leash, and having to figure out how did you step over it and now it's under you.
Yeah, and usually it comes back to, like you said, like something that we're doing. Even though the dog may inadvertently go or snap, head snap or do something or go to a different direction, it's usually just I didn't feed it properly, or I wasn't on top of it. I got too lackadaisical about the leash. Now when you're doing that, the gates, right, and you're going through this challenge, what do you typically like to have the handler hooked up to on their dog?
I let them decide.
Okay.
Because again, different agencies, different places, military versus police. Some guys are running their storm harnesses all the time. Some of them are running a tracking harness. Some of them are running a flat collar. So I'm like, on your day to day, where would you run? How would you run this? I would suggest you not run it on any sort of correction collar, right? No pinches or but usually a flat collar or a harness. Personally, I think the flat collar communicates more because it's directly tied to their head, and if their head goes one direction, typically their body has to follow. And trying to get their head to follow their body sometimes, the harness is a little more difficult, but it can be done. I've done it. We've done it. We've seen it done always.
Yeah. Through pet training, I teach like kind of the leash communication a little bit differently with the corrective collar, where they're using little taps with the leash to direct the dog to go different directions. And it takes me sometimes more time to demonstrate how to maneuver that direction yourself to show the dog, hey, if you go with that tap, you get rewarded, right? But when it comes to then working a dog, there's a time and a place you could do stuff like that too. It just depends on what you're doing.
Yeah, and the hard part, right, from what you're talking about is, most handlers have started to understand the whole pressure concept. And if the dog follows the release of pressure, or if the dog wants to release pressure, they can go that direction, right?
Yep.
This is almost the opposite.
Yeah.
Whereas we're actually using their opposition reflex as a positive.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm putting pressure on you this way to get you to pull that way.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it. Because when you're like, if we go back to the tracking side of it, if I'm doing that in tracking and I'm influencing the dog to go a certain direction, they might be blowing off a track just to be, again, too obedient to that leash pressure.
Yeah. You can watch 30 handlers run their dog, and they may have a ton of different ways they manipulate their leash, even on the same skill.
Yep.
Like they're all doing tracking, and all 30 of them run their stuff slightly different. But it's cool to see if they kind of, adapt some of these things you're teaching, how fast it can strengthen some of the communication on that skill.
And I would argue that most of them don't even realize what they're doing with their leash.
Yeah.
It's not something that's taught in your basic academy a lot of the time. Again, it's here's your dog on this tether.
Yeah.
And that's all it's here for. And then when we do tracking, it's here's your dog on this longer tether, and stay back from it and let it do its work.
Yeah.
And we're not, as handlers and as trainers, we kind of fall short of like, hey, this is a communication tool and we need to treat it as such.
Yeah. And I mean, we use, like you kind of talked about, leather and biothane, sometimes even like a nylon leash, depending on what you're doing. But it's weird to see there's a lot of new products coming out, but we don't shift to a lot of it because it's just, there's a lot of gimmicky stuff and stuff that is just unnecessary, right? So like I always just preach, keep your leash simple. A lot of the leashes I'm using, they don't even have handles. Even my shorter ones, I have like 7-foot leash I'll use that doesn't even have a handle on it.
Yeah.
Because I'm like rarely walking around holding a handle.
Right. See, and that's where you and I would differ, is all of my leashes have handles, because the one thing I was taught in my basic academy was you loop the handle around your thumb, and wrap around here. That way, if the dog does take off or you want to let him go, you just open your hand, it slides off your thumb, and you're gone. But
Which,
you
see,
have
that's a great point.
and
That
you,
is a great
and you
point.
have that control of, again, I was also taught gathering. You never had anything dragging on the ground to get stepped on. But it's just funny how those different things. But I've plenty of people that I know run, no handle leashes, and that's, it again. You're rarely ever coming to the end of that.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it too, is figuring out, like, most of the time if I'm running a leash like that, I'm doing more so like stuff,
Yeah.
like my tracking. Even actually my tracking leash I have a 15-foot tracking leash I've been kind of messing with, and that has a handle on the end of it. I don't like to get to the handle of it.
Yeah.
Again, there's times that when the dog's out tracking, need 20 feet of leash.
Yep.
You don't need to be right up on them.
Yeah.
So it's so hard to say, but it's it's going to be a cool class to see how much people can benefit their skill sets with a fundamental principle.
Yeah. I think if I can get people to show up, it'll be I think they'll walk away with some skills, some stuff to bring back to their agencies. The one thing that's not leash related, that's more geared towards our patrol dogs is, and I stole this from the Canadians, is the lift off drill for a hard takeoff for a patrol dog. Because that's one of those skills that, again, I teaching across the country in different places. I was like, well, you don't know how to do that the right way. And it pays off for sure.
And now that's a lift off of the dog.
Yeah.
When they're active on
if the dog's on a bite, how we go about doing a hard lift off. To me, it's a critical skill. It should be second nature. And honestly, I think anybody with a dog can benefit from it because it works on all dogs. It's not just a police dog dependent thing. So if you can know, what engages those lift offs, but especially important for our patrol dog handlers to know and to be second nature to get these dogs off. And it proved itself with one of my handlers on a bite. It was an accidental, nobody's fault but the terrain's, and he was able to recover and get that dog off in record time with minimal damage to everybody's.
Having it be such a muscle memory skill, it is important. And I think it is, you're right, it is thought of, my dog's not a bite dog, my dog's not a police dog, I don't need to learn that. But go watch 10 dog park fight videos. People are sticking their finger in a dog's butt or kicking the dog or whatever, right? And I get it. Sometimes you're just trying to stop a dog from getting killed. But, I've actually used that myself when a dog was on another dog. And if you do a good lift off properly, it ends it quick. And then you're not having to.
And it gives you, and you have that the dog you lift off, you have positive control of this dog until you can get it away.
Yeah.
So it's
all these skills, and I try to tell people, don't get so caught up in the category in which you work in, because a lot of these skills correlate with a lot of different varieties in dog training, whether it's pet dog training, sport dog, police dog, right? And leash handling is for sure one of them.
Yeah, it goes across all aspects, I think. But
we are guilty though of if they're, Cameron Ford, I stole this from him. He said, listen, if we're not lighting a decoy on fire and sending them out there, that people don't always want to be there, right? Because that's what's fun, is all the flashy fun stuff.
100%. When I was pitching this class for a conference that we're going to teach it at, they're like, yeah, you really got to kind of sexy this up if we're going to get people to show up. And I was like, yeah, I get it. Like, they're like, we admit, like, most people need it, but trying to get people to show up to it is going to be difficult. So
the basics are important though. And I'm sure once people come to this class and they learn a lot of this stuff, it gives them a place to go back to when things go south.
Yep.
And I think that's the biggest takeaway from a lot of this stuff is people, they want to do all the cool stuff, but you have to excel at the basics.
100%.
Because these are animals. We're not working with machines. And if you think your dog's squared away, I tell you, there's a day that you're going to make you scratch your head.
Yeah.
And you're like, why are you doing that way?
And it's probably because of something you let them get away with for so long and didn't even realize it.
And then a lot of people don't know how to fix it, right? And that's something I'm starting to see trend a little bit, is handlers doing more training rather than just a basic training and then run your dog. Understanding a little bit more of these training concepts, because you have to be able to fix behavior.
Yeah.
It sucks if you have to rely on somebody else, some external
the other guru
to fix your dog.
Yep.
Yeah. And for you guys, do you have any, at your agency, do you have any policies regarding leashes that are unique, or are you pretty?
I think we're pretty liberal on it. I think we give you a waist leash, we give you a 6 foot, we give you a long line. I think, and we give you a retractable and go forth and do
Hey,
great things. But again, we try to sit down and go over stuff with the guys, and hopefully, then some of them like it, some of them don't. Some of them find their own way. Some of them still use that damn button on the retractable.
tell you what, dogs pick up on cues so much that you have to spend time desensitizing them, training them off of it.
Yeah.
If you think that the button, there's so many things that I think could go wrong in a lot of these basic skills that I'm glad to see you putting on this class. Hopefully it's something that we'll get a bunch of people
Yeah.
to come to.
Hopefully.
Yeah. And if people have questions about a skill set like this, like, hey, what are you teaching about? Reach out.
Yeah.
They got to
100%.
ask questions because
Yeah,
this may be
nothing I have is mine. I will gladly share everything I've acquired and come across and personal experiences that I've learned from. Take it, learn from it, make it your own, rebrand it, use it again. I'm not making, not here to make money off of it. I just want to have good handlers and make people enjoy working with their dogs.
Yeah, I think that if you can help somebody to make whatever they're working on, make that more enjoyable for them or make it operational for them, that's huge. Because I'll tell you what, running a 30-foot leash and having it wrapped around your legs and tangled under your dog when you're trying to find somebody is frustrating. Finding a way to run the leash, and I think when we did tracking with James, I mean, we spent, I think, a week, just working with leash skills. And I think people would probably say you're crazy, but the reality is you have to get those fundamentals down first before you can advance to other skills. And I think it actually saved a lot of us a lot of headaches because later on, then you can, then if you want to play with your leash length or different things like that, you at least have the basics down. But I'll be excited to kind of check out and see some of what you're saying, like directing the dog in different ways. I think that's going to be pretty impactful.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks for coming on and
Yeah, appreciate you having
chatting
me.
about that. And what's the best way if people have questions about your course that they can get in contact with you?
So probably social media is probably the easiest. Veritas Kennels and Consulting on both the socials, and then we do have a website. There's a contact button on there as well.
If you guys are listening, we appreciate you joining us, and hopefully people will take something from this, or they'll think we're crazy.